Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Now, today we're going to be talking about the case of Jennifer Pan. This is one that is kind of like some of the other commentary uploads that we've done on the channel. It is something that is definitely going to be, just kind of discussing some issues associated with the case. It's because this is not an unsolved mystery like most of the things that we cover. And we're going to get back to some of those, like we're going to get back to some more this week about the Zodiac Killer because I have some new things to say about that. Also, lots of comments have come in about the disappearance of Brandon Lawson, so we're going to be hopefully doing something about that soon. But today, let's talk about Jennifer Pan, and she was, I guess you'd say, a student from Canada of Vietnamese descent, and she was involved with something called the Tiger Parent murders. This isn't exactly the kind of way that the media refer to it, but they sort of say that this was an extreme case of tiger parenting that drove a young woman, to kill her mother and attempt the murder of her father. First of all, what is tiger parenting? Well, it's sort of a name that has been given to these sort of overly obsessive and controlling and domineering kind of stereotypes in nature associated with people of Asian descent in North America, perhaps other parts of the world as well. Tiger parenting. In short, she had strict parents from an Asian background, and a lot of people sort of see this as like that's kind of the thing that pulls a lot of people in. I first heard about this case on Crime Watch Daily, one of their uploads on YouTube, although of course that show has now been renamed like True Crime Daily or something, but I think they put it up when it was Crime Watch Daily and it had like the little Crime Watch Daily thing in the corner. And I watched that one and I was just hooked, and I had to know more about the case. There's a short documentary on YouTube about Jennifer Pan, as well as this one thing called the Case File Podcast. I believe that's the name. Very, very well detailed. And of course, there's also a book out, and the last name of the author of the book is Grimaldi, and he wrote a book about Jennifer Pan, and very, very detailed stuff that is out there. And what we're going to say today is just going to be some general things, but I'm very much impressed about how well people were able to put together the sequences. But we always have to kind of bear in mind that's because this case is solved. More or less, we know what happened. Jennifer Pan was a student who kind of began to sort of fall off the horse. She began to sort of go down the wrong side of the tracks. She was someone who was a good student, very kind of aspiring, but then slowly began to decline in school. And to kind of hide this from her parents so she wouldn't deal with the humiliation of it all, she developed sort of either compulsive lying or pathological lying. She started lying to her parents a lot because she didn't want to deal with humiliation, rejection, and of course, being berated by her very intense Asian parents. So she actually didn't even graduate high school because she failed a calculus course. Maybe others, but like there was definitely, at least one course that caused her not to fail high school. So what did she do? She invented an entire storyline about pretending to study in a university, even though she wasn't even a real student. She was pretending to volunteer in a hospital, even though that hospital did not have volunteers. And it's like the first thing we need to say about this is, I mean, she did this all the way up into her mid 20s, like around the age of like 23, 24. But this is rather typical stuff for teenagers. I mean, when you're talking about a teenager, someone a little bit younger, I mean, I guess in my early 20s, maybe I even also hid things from my parents because get into, I didn't want to deal with some of the humiliation and backlash. And I think that's what really kind of pulls people into the Jennifer Pan case. That's why there's so many comments on this. People can sort of like either, not exactly sympathize, but it's more or less they understand the motivations that people would have to kind of hide things from their parents out of embarrassment. What they don't seem to kind of do most of the time is to murder their mother and attempt the murder of their father, but we can get to that. Some of the big things about this are it's just that what really brought it to this point. I mean, what was going on with Jennifer? Because, when we say that she murdered her mother and attempted the murder of her father, This dealt with an individual in her life named Daniel Wong, who ended up becoming her boyfriend. He was of Chinese Filipino descent. She's of Vietnamese descent, but they're still part of the sort of Asian grapeline, Asian pipeline that some people like to call it. And they started dating. But Daniel Wong was actually a major marijuana dealer. As they sort of said, he wasn't just selling joints, he was actually a major supplier for a large community of people. And he might have had some influence that would have pulled her down the wrong track, but I don't necessarily think that Daniel Wong and his kind of negative behavior would be the overwhelming influence on Jennifer Pan. At the end of the Crime Watch Daily episode, they had a very nice discussion when they're talking about how, like, how does this come about? How does someone just create this entirely fictitious persona and present it to their parents? We're not talking just about saying that they passed a calculus test when they actually failed it. No, absolutely not. They're lying to their parents about graduating high school, they're lying about attending college, lying about the work that they're doing at the hospital. The entire thing is not only stuff that you're telling your parents, but you're living in the same house and living through this lie every single day. But the first thing I can say about that is it's not completely unheard of. There's a certain individual named Casey Anthony that did very similar things. She did very similar things to her parents, created a complete, fiction about how she worked with Universal Studios, even gave her parents a tour of the studio where she claimed to work, and then just had to confess halfway through, I'm sorry, I don't actually work here. I mean, those are things that we do see from people who get caught up in destructive behavior. And I mean, William Shakespeare also mentioned the concept about how lying can lead to destructive behavior in the play Macbeth. I mean, so this is not unheard of. And it's just like the concept about how you tell one lie and then you have to tell more to cover that up. You do one misdeed and then you have to do more and more to cover up the situation to make it kind of appear normal. In short, one kind of mischievous action leads to more and more and more problematic actions, and that's just exactly what happened with Jennifer Pan. Okay, we talked about some things, but it's like, was it the negative influence from the boyfriend? Most likely not. Was it the fear of her parents? I mean, to an extent, but the real discussion they were getting into at the end of the Crime Watch Daily thing was, like, is she psychotic? Did she have a bad environment? Or is she just antisocial? And the sort of expert that they're talking to is kind of arguing that Jennifer Pan was most likely somebody who was an antisocial personality. Antisocial in the sense that it's like being against the social norm, where she did not really have the sort of social awareness about how to deal with conflict. And this is, I mean, like, I'm just so glad that they approached it from this angle because it feels just like that is one of the things that is just not very well represented in the media. A lot of people say the words mental illness and stuff like that, but people really like to zone in on things like psychosis. I mean, it's not always a psychotic issue. There are other types of mental issues that people are experiencing, and one of them is antisocial behavior and a variety of antisocial personality disorders, and especially some things we've talked about on this channel associated with narcissism and narcissistic personality disorders that are a little bit different. Do I think that Jennifer Pan was a narcissist? Not really. I think that it's like the guy saying she is antisocial. When she had conflict, she did not know how to respond to it in a constructive way. And that often leads to responding to things in a destructive way, primarily telling these wild stories to her parents, and it just becomes easier to create the fiction than it does to actually come forward and tell the truth and just be like, I failed out of high school. And, it's like she couldn't deal with the pressures of humiliation and probably would have dealt with a lot of verbal abuse and embarrassment and shame that would have associated with telling her parents the truth. So she created these fictitious stories about she graduated and she's going to college to study pharmacy, which her father had even chosen for her, to give you some insight into how overbearing her parents were. And then she's also talking about volunteering in the hospital and all of these things that are fictitious. But the thing about this is, it's just like she did not have the kind of social awareness to respond to conflicts. And went only from, it wasn't only just, someone who told lies. I mean, we would not be talking about her at all if she was somebody who just told wild stories to her parents and then got caught. We wouldn't even be talking to her if she was dating, a marijuana dealer. I mean, we were talking about Jennifer Pan because it actually led to the destructive point of orchestrating the murder of her mother and the attempted murder of her father. What happened with that was, it's like, if I recall, because of Daniel Wong's drug connections, he was able to get in touch with two people that would have carried out an assassination of her parents. In short, she wanted her parents out of her life. She wanted to continue the relationship with Daniel Wong. But one of the things that Crime Watch Daily and the short documentary that I heard on the case left out was something that I found on Wikipedia, that Daniel Wong was actually very frustrated with her relationship. And I mean, I don't always go to Wikipedia first, but like, prior to this recording, I just like decided to see what they had to say about the case. And one of the things that Jennifer Pan did was she recognized that Daniel Wong was, becoming very frustrated with her and not being able to see her except in their private secluded meetings. So she actually created a fictitious story for him that some guys had tried to gang rape her, and that she said a bullet was sent to her in the mail that was from another woman that Daniel Wong was interested in. So Jennifer Pan is just like a very, very manipulative, and it just became to the point where telling lies, spinning fictions to get what she wanted was the only thing she knew how to do. But the thing is, though, as we talked about, one these destructive actions kind of continue on in a snowball effect where they just become bigger and more intense. And in this case, it led to violence. I mean, if she had not gone to the level of trying to murder her parents, we would not be discussing this case in this particular way. But I'm sure some other very heinous act would have happened. It's just like she's going down the slippery slope, for lack of a better term. So Daniel Wong gets in touch with two people who want to carry out the assassination, and they shoot Jennifer's mom. They shoot Jennifer's father in the face, and he is somehow able to survive. But the thing is, though, Jennifer is tied to a banister upstairs, and this was the biggest thing that tipped police off. It's like, why would they shoot two people and then leave one person who was completely able-bodied just tied up? But the thing is, though, she almost got away with it. I mean, she was able to demonstrate that even tied to the banister, she could have called 911, gave a perfectly plausible explanation. She had an excellent ability to lie and weave these crazy fictitious stories. And they were actually saying in on multiple uploads that if her father had not survived the shooting, she most likely would have gotten away with it. The problem was, though, her father lived and he was able to tell his side of the story, and that he heard her talking casually to the people and something of that nature. But the fact of the matter is, if her father had not survived, the police might have believed her story, even though it didn't really add up. But because, many valuables were not taken, there were televisions that were left untouched. And it seems like from the start the police really had the instincts that this was not just a robbery gone wrong, that this actually was a different sort of crime, which it was. And I believe that all four individuals, Daniel Wong, Jennifer Pan, and the two hitmen, received life in prison, and Jennifer Pan is no longer able to talk to her family. Like, she's barred from all communication from family members. And that's for the best, because, I mean, she would probably just carry on in the same old ways, creating some sort of bizarre, fictitious story to try and just because that's all she seemed to know. She went down a very destructive route, and I think the things that people are kind of going to be zoning in on this particular case are, was it the parents' behavior that pushed her to this, or was it the boyfriend? Did she have some sort of born psychological problem? Because we did one upload on this channel talking about narcissism, psychopathy, and sociopathy. Like, a sociopath is somebody who develops the kind of traits and tendencies when they are like throughout their childhood and throughout their life, whereas a psychopath is someone who is born with them. And what I would really say is that, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not any sort of, anything in that field, but it's like my sort of just reaction is that yes, her parents' behavior probably really influenced the antisocial behavior that Jennifer Pan exhibited. But the things about it are, they definitely did not deserve what they got to get murdered. And of course, her father getting shot in the face, which ultimately he did survive. They did not deserve that. And it's kind of just like some things that we always just need to be kind of aware of. Like, where is, though, the origin of the problem? Because when I talk about things like true crime, I mean, a lot of people have questioned the motivations when they're just like, one of the things I said that one of the reasons why people follow true crime stories is they want to learn about what are the causes of these problems so we can be aware of them for the future. And someone's telling me, I don't think that's true. People are just blowing shit out of proportion because they want to. It's sensationalism and they want to exploit this case to get ratings and such. Someone sort of said that, and I have to kind of push back against that. I mean, the reason why a lot of us follow true crime cases is with the unsolved mysteries, we want to get definitive answers, and sometimes the armchair detectives are the only people who are actually still exploring. The police have put it in the cold case files and they don't want to follow it. But with something such as Jennifer Pan, where the case has been solved, we just want to have a greater understanding of how society functions and how human beings function, and what really leads to something like this. But a big thing, the thing that I just have to reiterate the most is that it seems like this is not a case of anything such as, an extreme psychotic. This is the case of probably someone most likely who just had a serious antisocial issue that might have started with something very early on in childhood when Jennifer would just probably grew up her whole life not knowing how to interact with conflict. Like when there was a conflict happening, she probably just knew how to respond, but not respond in a constructive way. And we definitively know that one of her defense mechanisms to dealing with conflict was to avoid punishment, avoid the situation entirely by creating these fictitious stories. In short, extreme cases of lying. And can you imagine, though, living in your parents' house for years, try deceiving them about graduating high school, deceiving them about going to college, deceiving them about the kind of job you have? Once again, I brought up the example of Casey Anthony. There's also another episode of like that show Intervention. Once a guy was spending 3 months where he was just sleeping in his car during the day and then coming home at night telling his parents he was at community college. I mean, some people do things like that, and it happens, but I just can't. I mean, I can't begin to fathom the sort of kind of effects that would have on a person to draw that out for just sort of years when your parents think that you're doing one thing and I mean, like, we're not talking about something simple about deceiving your parents that you graduated high school, that you're in college, you're going to be a pharmacist, you're this, upstanding citizen, but in reality, it's all a lie. And then there's one big thing though that we should really say. And one of the things that they try to identify though about the motivation for actually organizing the hit is because Jennifer Pan just couldn't leave her family. They say that she wanted the relationship with Daniel Wong, but the thing is, there's like, why didn't she just leave? I mean, why didn't you just take a backpack and walk out the door and just be like, I'm never coming back? It was easier for her to organize a murder than it was to just be honest and say, I want to leave the family. And like, there's an enormous amount of pressure and social conditioning that must have gone into that. There's an enormous amount of probably just years of conditioning and manipulation on the behalf of the parents. On behalf of the parents who have probably, just I mean, all Jennifer knows is that if she does this, her parents are going to try and embarrass her, humiliate her, put pressure on her to get her to do what they want in a desired way. So her only response is, I can't get out. And that leads to the antisocial response, which in this case was a violent one. Well, anyway, this is my little rant about the case of Jennifer Pan, once again from Toronto, Canada. And this happened years ago. I wanted to say that this actually happened back in 2010, but that date has slipped my mind. And, we're going to maybe explore some other similar cases like this. I find this stuff absolutely fascinating. I'm not an absolute expert on this case, but be nice to kind of even get some more information about it. I would love to read the book by Grimaldi. I would like to just learn more about this particular instance, and we can maybe have another discussion in the future. I definitely would like to discuss more things about antisocial personalities, and maybe we can find some other sort of examples and really learn about the sort of different things that people are experiencing that are leading to the destructive behaviors. Well, that's all now, and thank you for listening, and until next time.